Hello, everyone. We got people filing in. We're going to give everybody another minute here just to make sure everything's working, and we look forward to you joining us for this presentation. Get started here real soon. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Keith Heller of Heller Consulting. We're welcoming you to Building a CRM Vision into Reality, our webinar for today. I'm joined by Frank Lucido from Room to Read, and we're looking forward to the next 45 minutes to an hour to really talk to you about the process of engaging in a CRM initiative. So without further ado, we're going to get started here. So just quickly about Heller Consulting, we've been helping nonprofits with their technology for the last 20 years. Actually just had our anniversary last month. We've served over 1,500 nonprofit clients, over 3,000 projects located around the country, and we all, everyone at Heller Consulting, we just love what we do. We've all worked for nonprofits in the past, fell in love with the sector, fell in love with technology. Our families wonder why, but we just really have a good time thinking through technology and strategy and making those things come together on behalf of our clients. So really excited to share with you today a bit about what we've learned through that. Some of what we do, we help with obviously with the technology with CRM systems. That's what we're talking about today. Thinking and strategizing and planning for that, implementing those. And of course, everyone has existing systems, and we like to help people optimize their use of those systems as well. And for us, it's not just about technology. A huge piece of what we do is we think about people, maybe particularly in the nonprofit sector. It's a very participative sector. We all like to communicate and be part of things, and that's part of why we're in this part of, in nonprofits. And so working together with teams is really, really important. We ourselves try to work together very well, and we try to work with our clients. And so we look not just at technology, but also at business processes, change management, communications, mentoring, team configuration, et cetera. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then we like to make sure that the work that we're doing with our technology is really helping the organization achieve more strategically. And for that, we help with direct response strategy and such so that the outreach to your constituents is more effective and really helps you grow your organization either from a fundraising perspective or advocacy or participation in general. So some of our clients here, you'll notice, hopefully you'll recognize some of the names, and I know some of these folks are on the presentation today, so we welcome all of you. And this webinar is just one part of our library of resources that we try to make available. We ourselves are a social venture. Part of what we do is we think of ourselves a little bit as a think tank, and we know that as a boutique firm, we're not going to work with every nonprofit in the sector, but we want everyone who can benefit from our experience to have access to that. And so we write a lot of white papers. You see a whole bunch on CRM, on Salesforce, on engagement. We do these webinars. These get published. This one will get published, so you can bring it back to your colleagues. The holidays are coming up. Share it with friends and family. We really hope that this is useful to you today, and that you'll find more of this useful to you. So that's a little bit about Heller, and I'd like to invite Frank to say a bit about Room to Read.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can.
Great. Sorry, I was still muted there for a moment. So hi, my name is Frank Lucido. I am a Director of IT and Business Solutions at Room to Read. Room to Read is a organization working in multiple countries around the world, mostly in Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa. Our mission is to transform the lives of millions of children in developing countries. Our focus is on literacy and gender equality in education. We recently, over the last 2 years, have gone through a major shift internally in our CRM strategy and our CRM technology stack. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about how we moved forward through what was a, albeit successful but challenging transition, and some of the things that we learned that I think are good takeaways, as well as some gotchas that are in there as well.
Frank, I'm really so pleased that you could be part of this today, share your experience. It's been really great for us to work with you as a client, and folks, what I'm going to present is a framework based on our consulting experience with hundreds of organizations, but that's a little more, I want to say, high level or generic, not in a bad way, but really appreciate that, Frank, you can bring to that framework your real direct boots on the ground experience. So let's jump in. I'm going to start by talking about CRM vision. And this is where every CRM initiative ideally starts. So let's talk about what that is. First of all, let's talk about what do most people's CRM or database environments look like. Here you go. Almost every nonprofit, and certainly every nonprofit that comes to us, talks about silos, data in multiple systems. And it presents itself as a technical challenge, an operational challenge, but in fact, it goes deeper than that for the organization. In fact, the problem is it's asymptomatic of what we call the disconnected nonprofit, which no one should flagellate themselves for. This is standard. Everyone is dealing with this in some degree. Practically, you have the same people represented in multiple systems across your organization. And that presents, of course, a technical challenge, but really the core problem is it presents a challenge to your constituents in engaging with you in the best possible way and having the best possible experience. And that ends up constraining you as well. You end up having miscommunications where if you have the same person in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 databases and each of the business units that use those databases are sending emails, well, the same person is getting multiple emails, but there's no coordination. Someone calls one department, a constituent calls one department, and the person in that department doesn't know the relationship of that constituent to other departments. And there's a missed opportunity to express appreciation, to personalize the experience that constituent has in connecting with you. And this, over time, makes constituents question the efficacy of your organization and the trust that they're putting in you. And this would be okay if you were the only nonprofit out there, because then they would say, well, these are who I can support and work with, and therefore I'll keep doing that. But we don't talk a lot about it in the sector, but in fact, it's a competitive environment, and other nonprofits are also communicating with your constituents, and constituents will gravitate towards those organizations that they feel demonstrate the best stewardship of their resources, whether those are financial or time or just mind share. So where do you start? Well, you don't race off to buy technology. First, you stop and you think, what is the experience that we want our constituents to have, right? Sometimes people will jump to, well, we want a 360-degree view of our constituents. Well, why? What would that do for you? What would that do for your constituents? And start to detail this out. How do we want to relate to our constituents? How do we want them to relate to us? Or what do we want that experience to be when a constituent, comes to an event, comes to our website, goes online, Facebook and Twitter, receives our emails, receives our direct mail? What do we want that experience to be in a holistic, well-rounded way? When they call one department, what What do we want that experience to be, and can we unify that experience for the constituents? So it's important not just to say these, but to write them down, because that CRM vision is really important later to be articulate in the midst of a CRM project. Once you've articulated this engagement strategy, then you can go and you can look at technology itself, and you will have many choices in the contemporary technologies that are available to nonprofits, and how you decide which of those technologies to use and how to use them will be based on your engagement strategy, because each organization ends up having a variation, its own unique take on its engagement strategy, and that strategy ends up guiding very practical choices. There's no one system that will do everything, and there's no one way to configure any one particular system. And so there'll be a process of prioritization which will be guided by by this CRM vision. So now, Frank, maybe you could comment on it. Is what I said real in the real world, and what has been your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. And a lot of what Keith just went through is very similar to the process that we went through. When we engaged with Heller, we took a phase 1 approach of actually writing a CRM envisioning and CRM roadmap plan. And in this area, I can't emphasize strongly enough how important this upfront work is. And a couple areas here that I think are really going to lead to success within any organization is, one, you're going to have high-level executive buy-in on the vision and strategy program, because you're going to reach back and call out to this vision that you've created constantly as operational issues arise. What do we do in this situation? We've got 3 or 4 options. We've got a lot of ways to deal with a problem. And you don't necessarily just want operational answers to those. You know, whoever is running your donor operations will definitely have a take on what's the easiest way for them to do that. And I think you want to be really careful that that fits well with your vision. So we spent probably the first 6 months going through writing up a strategic vision, and then based on that, a roadmap that is, now 2 years in, is still, as we go through budget each year, is still the place we look to see what we need to do each year in terms of developing our CRM capabilities and our overall technology stack. The other thing I would say is from this planning phase, specifically around strategy, make sure you don't get caught in the trap of, and this was kind of a gotcha that we had along the way, people will tend to ask for best practices. What do other organizations do? I think this is not always the best place to start, or even land. Each organization is going to be pretty individualized in strategy and function, and I think it makes it difficult to work through some of those hard questions internally if what we do is reach out for a white paper or a best practice and just say that's what we should do. So I just as kind of a gotcha in there, we did a little bit of that, and I think it slowed down and hurt a little bit our strategic planning by constantly trying to take a shortcut through best practices and what do other organizations do. Not that there isn't value in understanding those things, but I do think it can be a bit of a honey pot to go in there and think that your answers will lie in that area. And again, I can't emphasize enough, high-level executive support on this is so important, and it needs to be completely bought in from whoever the executive director is down in terms of strategy, so you can actually leverage the strategy as you move through the process.
Frank, I really appreciate those comments, and we see it at a lot of organizations. First of all, just to comment, the executive sponsor role, the executive sponsor does not have to understand CRM in a technical sense, and they don't have to expect to use it particularly, but they certainly will benefit from it. And so they need to be, like you say, bought in, and they need to be a cheerleader for this. They need to be a cheerleader for the organization as a whole and the internal stakeholders, and then they likely have to champion it with the board. So it's very important that the most successful CRM projects are those that are understood in the executive suite to be intertwined with the mission of the organization, rather than, oh yeah, the tech team, they're buying some new toys. Hope they have fun. Hope it comes in under budget. Well, that's too hands-off. And I think I appreciate what you point out about business process and such best practices. There's this there's a temptation for all of us to say, hey, there's a silver bullet out there. And, what we do at our organization is it's cumbersome, or it's annoying, or it's difficult, and so there must be a best practice that's just going to make all this so easy. Well, maybe. But best practices are great, and they should be a reference point. But like you say, Frank, it's not an endpoint. It's an ingredient to consider and have inform, but you're going to have to do some of the heavy lifting in your organization to make blend those best practices with what you've done in the past, with what works for you and what you'd like to change. And the fact is, you can either go and decide to do this consciously up front, or you'll end up doing it anyway. But when you end up doing it kind of, not out of choice, not out of planning to do it, it's just more difficult and less effective in the end. So, let's go ahead, Frank.
Keith, just one
Please.
Last thing to add. The other thing that I think was a difficult paradigm shift for us to get through, but once we did, it was very helpful, was CRM is not a piece of software. CRM is a well-developed strategy on how to interact with your constituents, on how to treat them, on how to be engaged with them. The software is there to help you make that happen in a meaningful and process-focused way. But CRM itself is an idea. It is a philosophy about how we interact with our constituents. It's not the actual software. The software is just one tool within a CRM vision. So I do think that's just an important thing to remember as we move through, as any organization moves through their CRM strategy, that you are buying into a philosophy here about how to engage with, talk to, retain information about your constituents.
Frank, I'm tempted to just take what you just said and play it on a loop for the rest of the hour. That's really great. I knew there was a reason we really liked working with you. So I'm going to jump in. Let's talk then about how do you get started. So our perspective is an organization is really well served by developing a CRM roadmap. So a CRM roadmap, I'm going to talk about what it is in detail in a minute, but conceptually, you can think of it as, gosh, we want to build a house for our data. In fact, or for our information. And we have a really nice piece of land. And so we might have more than one building over time. And how we need to think of in advance about how we're going to develop, our CRM estate. And so you bring in an architect. And you draw out the plans so that you can build this over time in a really thoughtful way. Because as we do start to move towards talking about the technology that supports the strategy, this is not something that happens in a single project. If you're adopting a truly robust CRM as part of your strategy, you will grow into that CRM environment over the course of months, quarters, years. And you will get the most value for your investments financially and of time if you plan ahead what that looks like. You don't want to, this is my bias and experience, but you don't want to jump in and, we build the foundation, we build the first story, and then we live in it, and a year later we decide, okay, we're going to build a second story. Go, oh, you know what? We didn't put enough concrete in the foundation to build a second story for us. We painted ourselves into a corner. So a CRM roadmap is about thinking ahead. So what does one look like? Well, first of all, conceptually, CRM roadmap, first of all, it's an opportunity to articulate your organization's CRM vision. So as Frank related, they took several months to really think about what the CRM vision was. Of course, it wasn't a technical vision. It was a fundamental strategy for the entire organization. And it's something that, like with best practices, you could sort of give it a cursory look and then move into a technology project. But at a certain point, most technology projects that go that route get stymied because they stumble upon these strategic questions that haven't been answered. And either the project grinds to a halt, or the project decides to ignore those questions and plow forward, and then the goal of the project ends up being, we just want to go live. We just want to move our data. And the value to the organization a year later is, well, we're doing the same thing we always did in basically the same way we always did it with shiny new tools. But we haven't actually realized the value. So doing a CRM roadmap that articulates that CRM vision, to do that, you have to engage and collaborate together inside your organization. So it's a real process for doing that. And at the end, it's also, there's a plan. So there is something very practical that comes out of it. So what are the elements? This is a table of contents for a CRM roadmap. There's about a dozen items here. Not all of them need to be part of every organization's roadmap. So it could look a little overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, I have to write a novel, and it's not only a novel, it's a Russian novel, and it's Tolstoy at his best, Well, you don't have to put together War and Peace to move towards CRM. But for your organization, you'll pick those pieces of this that really make a lot of sense. And I'm going to talk about the highlighted ones here today. And you'll see the first one is CRM vision. So I'm pretty attached to that one, everyone doing that, but beyond that, there's different pieces that people need. So what a CRM roadmap will do, though, is raise and answer key questions. So assuming that CRM vision is part of this, some of the questions then become, what are we doing? And it's good to articulate that because you're going to be asked. If you're part of the core CRM team, and I think most people on this call would be, the project team, there's going to be these questions like, oh, what is this project I'm hearing about for CRM? Or what's going to happen? Who's doing things? And when people say who, they implied in that is usually, and what am I going to have to do? What am I going to be asked to do? What kind of tools am I going to be, or support am I going to be given to do this thing, which I probably haven't done before in my career? And what's it going to mean to me in the end? How is my job role going to change? What's going to change that I probably am not happy about? And what's going to change that I will be happy about? And so to think about these things in advance and how you're going to talk about those, very important as part of the change management. How are we going to go about this? Right, so that's very practical. We'll look a little later at a framework for an implementation plan. How is this whole thing going to happen? And when? Right? And the key question, why are we doing this? Because at the beginning of a project, people are sort of curious. Hey, why are we doing this project? In the heat of a project, I'm going to tell you right now, if you work with us or you work with anybody, in the middle of a project, you're going to hit a point where you throw up your hands and you say, why in the world am I putting myself through this? And you want to have an answer for yourself and for others. And that's where the CRM vision comes back, which is always more than, well, we just needed a new system. It's, oh, that's right. We are trying to have a greater impact through our mission. And this CRM vision reminds me and guides me in how this project that today is really frustrating is going to help my organization in the future. So Frank, maybe your reflections on this.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. A couple of things just on the last slide that we had, the how, when, who, why. There's a couple things in here just from our own experience that I want to touch on. And the why and the what, again, I probably sound like a broken record, but I really can't emphasize enough how much this will assist your project in being successful in actually having really strong engagement in this area. You know, I've been doing this now since the mid-90s, I guess. I think the first CRM project I did was in a old Mass. We did a Mass 80 and for accounting, and God, I don't even remember what the CRM was on that, but it's been a long time. And the software has progressed, but what hasn't changed in that period is the engagement from the top level down. Whether you're a regional sales manager, senior vice president of business development, or whatever your role is in terms of constituent management, especially the further you go up the chain, you have to understand what you've done when you've chosen a CRM product, and you have to be able to articulate how you're going to manage through this process. You're going to have to understand how you want to staff now that you have this. You're going to have to understand how you want to see revenue reporting now that you're going to do this. And you can't do that unless you've really kind of bought in at this level. A couple of things about the who and the when. I would say be careful about the when. Everybody wants a well-defined project with a timeline that makes sense to them, and believe me, I understand the importance of budget in this area. I really do, and struggle with it constantly. But I have seen projects fail based on putting a stake in the ground about the when and not being able to be flexible as you move and deal with the reality of a situation relative to that when it needs to go live. And Keith mentioned it a moment ago around the let's go live on this date, and that's what everybody points to. So I would be really careful in that area and be very thoughtful. And then the who, again, I would just say be really careful in this area in that I know we had a little bit of a gotcha on this one, which was the focus of who's doing each piece can really narrow down to a very small group of people. And that can really kind of focus your entire strategy through their vision of it. So I would really encourage folks to stay broad in who is engaged in this and how operational decisions or how operational folks are interpreting the strategy, and making sure that your executive management is in agreement with the operational decisions and keep that communication loop really open.
I appreciate that, Frank, and just to piggyback on that, we have resources that talk about how you staff a CRM project and team, and part of what you want to do there is within the CRM team's job. Well, it usually represents multiple departments, people from multiple departments, executive stakeholders, and part of the role of that task force is to hold the big picture, even as you work in greater detail with specific departments, so that vision doesn't get too narrowed. So appreciate you pointing that out. So now we're going to get a little more tactical. Still going to be pretty strategic, but now you're going to start to see some things that are less conceptual. So we're going to talk about the phased adoption approach. As I noted earlier, you're not going to, ideally, you're buying, you're investing in a strategy, and you're buying technology that's going to allow you to really grow over time. And so you're going to adopt it over time in multiple phases. And so I'm going to show you 3 slides from a client that show kind of before, middle, and after. And the details are less important than the just what you'll see visually in terms of how their environment became simpler. And simpler for them had the impact of being easier to use and therefore easier to deliver the experience they wanted for their constituents. So as you can see, when we first engaged with them, they had a lot of these bubbles here, and each one of these represented dozens of systems. So their legacy CRM on the top left was a large fundraising database that represented 37, had data in there from 37 of their 120 chapters and affiliates. And on the left, their chapter CRM systems ranged anywhere from, commercial fundraising databases down to Excel spreadsheets, and they had 600 different data sources across the 120 affiliates. And then when you look at their online presence, it looks like a few bubbles, but there's not enough room for how many different online systems they had, whether it was, the fact that they had all of those affiliates, and of course every affiliate could have multiple online presences because they had, somebody for email and somebody else for donation pages and somebody else for event registration. And gosh, how do you bring all that together? So that was the technical challenge, and of course the strategic challenge is how do we treat people, our constituents, in a way that helps them understand we see them as individuals, and we can build relationships from there. So they said, hey, our first goal would be, let's consolidate our online presence so that we at the national level can offer to the affiliates and bring them into a unified environment. So there's unified branding across the organization, there's a unified email system, donation pages, event registration, etc. So that was a goal. Let's move from their, what was at that point outdated and legacy fundraising system for those 37 into a new environment. And let's bring over the bulk of those chapter CRM systems. And so in the end, they brought together data from those 120 affiliates into that single CRM, and let's make these things linked together. And so they were able to do that. And that was a huge undertaking. It took a year and a half. But it allowed the organization to run a lot more smoothly. And for them, that was a good place to land and wait for a while, let that whole project kind of be digested by the organization. And then the final phase for them is to bring any remaining business practices and things around fundraising and bring in, you'll notice here, the mission on the bottom right into the CRM, so that all of what they were doing was coming out of that core system as well. Now, this architecture that you see here in the last slide is a pretty common one, and about as tight and good as you can get these days. The CRM and the online tools are going to be distinct. Now, not necessarily as separate as they used to be, because the line between online and offline is changing, especially if your CRM is SaaS and low, internet-based. Well, then that line between online and offline starts to blur a little bit, which is really great from an integration perspective, from a reporting perspective and such. But there's still online tools for communication engagement are out ahead of what a CRM can provide natively. And the general ledger does not have to be the same platform as your CRM. It has distinct purpose within your organization. And so I present this so that you have a realistic sense of how consolidated can one get and what should you aim for. And this is about as good as it gets, and it's quite good. So how do you decide what order to adopt new systems, retire old systems? So these are some criteria that you can work through. What are the best opportunities available to us? Which system, if I adopted it, is going to have the greatest impact most quickly? Or a lot of people are driven by pain. You know, gosh, this system is end of life. This one is on our client server, you know, network, and it's crumbling. This one is just, you know, too old and decrepit for us to be effective, and that can drive, you know, what you decide to change first. Which things can we change most quickly? Sometimes you want to look for something you can do quickly to have an impact. And the impact may be smaller, but the fact that you can do it sooner helps establish trust in the organization and your ability to make change. So you make a small change successfully, and you leverage that into support for a bigger change. Where can we have the greatest impact? Where can we establish a foundation for future success? So all of these kind of blend together in your considerations. You know, ideally, if there's a quadrant between effort and impact, with a low and a high on the axis, you know, maybe you can get something in that quadrant that's, you know, high impact, and we can get it done quickly. Now that's, you know, usually those are unicorns. That's hard to find a lot, but you start to kind of matrix that stuff out. I don't know if that's a verb, but it is for me. And decide where can we get started, and what are some of our other constraints on the technology, and, you know, huge one, organizational readiness. You could objectively identify, gosh, if that department got off that decrepit system onto this new thing I've seen, it would be great, but that department might not be ready for it. It might be too much change for them to absorb, and so you have to look somewhere else. You might look at another system that says, oh, you know, we do peer-to-peer fundraising, and wouldn't it be great to adopt this new system that I've seen and that everybody's saying is the best thing since, you know, since sliced bread, but it's the middle of the season, or it's coming up on the key peer-to-peer season for your organization. It's not going to happen right now. So all of these kind of go in the mix as you look at how to do your phasing. So Frank, maybe you could say a little bit about how you folks approached it.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So a couple of things in this area, and this is, I would say, a bit of a cautionary tale. When we started out our CRM project a couple of years ago, we felt that we could maybe take off a bigger bite than we could really chew internally, and we came from a blackbaud, you know, environment using BBMC, using RE, using net communities, and we thought that what we had to do was change everything at once because they were all interconnected. What we came to find out, and I think everyone will find this out, is if you do not plan your phases will be planned for you. My guess is, as a nonprofit, you don't have anywhere near enough resources to be able to tackle more than one phase at a time. So I would be really, really thoughtful in figuring out how you can do that part. Again, for every organization, it's going to be different, but I would say take this seriously. Take it real seriously. The other comment I would have around phasing is take time in terms of your technology choices. There are certain parts of the industry that have matured very quickly. I think Salesforce has done a fantastic job kind of moving products forward in the CRM phase. I think that peer-to-peer is still maturing. I mean, we're still working to try to really figure out how to make that solution as advantageous as possible, and as advantageous for the folks who are using it as well. There are other areas around our online presence that really fell into our marketing and comms group, and being respectful of their time and understanding what technologies are available there as well. So I would say in terms of phasing, even if you think you need to get it all done at once, you don't. You really do need to take this seriously and have a very planful and mindful approach to how you're going to roll this out. And then lastly, I would just say change fatigue within an organization is a very, very real thing. Humans can only pick up so much at a certain pace, and if you outpace that, it is a pretty good indicator of a troubled project. So again, I would just say really be mindful of how you're going to split this into digestible, trainable, usable chunks, and don't assume that your organization is so ready for change that you'll do it all at once.
Well, thanks, Frank. And folks, I want to let you know we've got just a couple sections left here, and then we have time for questions and answers. So I encourage you to use the questions portion of GoToMeeting and start putting in some things that if we can be helpful, our experience here today, we'd love to take a little bit of time here at the end to answer any questions you have. So let's talk a little bit about architecture. So we're not going to go deeply here, but I've got a couple sets of before and after pictures, just so you get a sense of what it means to move to and consolidate your CRM environment. So pictures are better than words, so let me just show you here. Here's an organization that had, they got a lot of pieces here, a lot of different, and this is completely normal. And it makes sense given the way the technology has evolved and the way we have adopted technology. And so this is by no means an outlier. And these folks, had multiple systems linked via sometimes developed integrations, which are the solid lines, and then somewhat more manual or download, upload types of integrations through the dotted lines. But what you see is they have a lot of pieces. Right, and again, completely normal and makes sense based on what technologies they adopt at the time that they adopted them. Thereafter is here. Okay, now you'll see these little boxes inside the larger areas are the business needs that they had. The number of business needs didn't change; it didn't go down. In fact, it could have even gone up, given on the left, like what they want to be able to do online. But they were able to adopt an architecture across the organization that was much more unified. And again, that's based on what's contemporary available in the marketplace. And you'll see they have that three-piece structure like with earlier phasing, where they have the core CRM, they have an external online presence, and they have a general ledger. So this is just to give you a sense of how things can start to be pulled together. So here's another one. Again, these folks, lots of different pieces. Again, all grew up sort of organically. And then this is what their after looks like. Again, much smaller number of pieces. Each piece does more. The website does more. The CRM does more. And again, that kind of three-piece structure. Frank, I think this is along the lines of where you folks move towards. Maybe you could comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, this is actually fairly similar. We have a SaaS general ledger, and we're using Salesforce NGOC as our, that's the round corner product, as our CRM. And then we've put, for the most part, everything else either connected to our website, other than email marketing, which is, we are using the Salesforce product for that. But the rest of our environment looks very similar to this. I'm not going to bore you guys going into details at the integration level or exactly what applications we're using. If anybody wanted to contact me after, I have no problem spending a lot of time on that, but probably don't have time here. But this is kind of how it's going to have to end up at some point, that you're going to have a set of online applications, your core CRM, and then your general ledger.
Thanks, Frank. And we've got a couple questions rolling in. One of them I'm going to defer until we talk about change management. It's right in line with what we're going to talk about there. And then I have another one here. What advice do you have for a very small but mighty nonprofit? We're starting with a nonprofit starter pack from Salesforce, which will likely serve us well for the next 2 years. Well, I think a couple comments there. One is that I would think longer than 2 years, because it is the very rare nonprofit that has the financial and staff resources and the emotional wherewithal to change systems more than usually every 5 or 10 years. So it's important to think longer term and assume a longer term. The other is that for NPSP, I'll put in a shameless plug and say that in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a session in San Francisco about NPSP and how to adopt that platform as the central to your CRM strategy. So I invite you to take a look at our website and see when that's coming up. And if you're in the San Francisco area, please join us. Otherwise, we have some materials on our website about NPSP and some of those white papers, and of course the Power of Us hub that is offered by this Salesforce.org has a lot about NPSP and how to adopt it. So I encourage you to take advantage of all those resources. Okay, we're going to talk about implementation. This is very brief. This is a very high-level implementation plan, and each phase of your project will have a plan that looks like this at a very high level, and then very detailed and different depending on what you're implementing. Are you implementing a fundraising system, a marketing system, a call center, reporting and business intelligence? Each of those will look somewhat like this, but then the details will vary quite a bit depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, you'll see, I want to point out here that each of these aspects, each phase begins with its own discovery and planning phase. So, at times it can look like, gosh, between doing a CRM roadmap and each phase I have to do planning, I'm doing a lot of planning. Well, when you look at the questions that need to be answered and the decisions that need to be made in a planning process, if you think, God, there's too much planning, can we just get started? Can we just get going? I'd encourage you to look at the content of a planning phase and say, well, do I think I'm going to have to deal with this issue or question at some point in the project? And if you do, dealing with it up front is a lot easier than it is to get halfway through building your house and decide, you know what, I'm going to need a second or third or fourth bathroom. Well, what do I do now? I already laid in a bunch of the plumbing. So even though planning can feel like, I just want to get going here, if you don't do that planning, you will end up wrestling with those questions at some point in the project, and your options will be more limited at that time. So encourage you to, obviously I'm very biased towards planning, but encourage you in that. Frank, maybe you can share a little bit about going from roadmap to implementation.
Yeah, and one thing, I just want to echo what Keith said. Nobody ever failed at what they were doing because they planned too much. I mean, maybe somebody did, but planning will certainly not hurt you. And planning, a lot like I think with the phases, is if you don't plan mindfully and purposefully, it will be planned for you, and it probably won't be planned in the way you want it to be. So I would take that very seriously. And the one thing within the diagram that Keith just showed is I would advise having a feedback loop within this process at each level. One of the things that you will come to find is you're probably not going to get anything right the first time. You may get aspects of it right, but as you get into the test and final prep phase, you'll figure out that there's things that just got missed, that you didn't understand it well enough in order to make a sound decision at that point. And so two things I would be easy on yourself, knowing that going through this process, you literally can't get everything because all of the information won't be available. So build in feedback loops between each phase. Did we really do this right? Is this design right? How do we is the build and config right? Build in feedback loops through each of these internally, so you can constantly be having the discussion as you implement about how it's happening. And I would say, as an organization, be capable of understanding as quickly as possible if mistakes were made, and don't be surprised that that happens. It will. There's no two ways about it. And be flexible and resilient to that kind of process, or it becomes very difficult.
Perfect, Frank. I have to relate that at some point I was talking to a prospective client, and I asked them about their current environment and how that came to be, and they said, well, it was a very organic process. And I said, do you mean organic or chaotic? And they said, well, actually chaotic. So this is where, planning looks a little more, can appear to look a little more rigid, but in fact it gives you more options over time. And the feedback loop that you're suggesting, Frank, is a great idea, and that introduces the dynamism into what can look like a static process. But in a very, it's dynamism that is very constructive. Last bit we want to talk about here, change management, communication. This is really core, and I think you've probably picked this up. The technology aspect of a CRM project is often the less challenging aspect. The key challenges are forming the vision, developing the strategy, getting the buy-in, getting people to participate in the project over time, helping people, frankly, not freak out too much about doing the project, see the big picture. So we have a paper about this. I really, would love if you downloaded it and found it useful. We put people end up being at the center of every technology project. And Frank, maybe you can share a little bit of your experience there.
This is, I think, the portion of a project that is everybody thinks they're going to do really well, and tends to be something that doesn't go as planned a lot of the time. So a couple of things I would say. One is kind of like, very few things ever fail because you planned them too much. Very few changes were ever hampered by too much communication. If the communication is seriously thoughtful and pointed and instructive, you almost can't have too much of it. Obviously, vague and poorly structured communication doesn't help your cause in any way, but take a communication plan seriously and take your change management seriously. It will be the biggest indicator of success in your project, is getting people to actually make the change. That being said, understand that through this process, there are going to be periods where people are very uncomfortable. This is going to happen. There is no way around it. People will be learning new skills. People will be seeing information in different ways. Be prepared to help people through their discomfort, and be prepared to allow them to be uncomfortable for periods while they change. It's just going to happen. No matter how what the quality of a change in life is, it is always a little uncomfortable to have it happen, and people will experience that. And be there, be kind to them through that, be understanding through that, and have a plan ahead of time to deal with the fact that people are going to bump into frustration and discomfort as you go through this process.
Frank, we've got a good question here, and it's a hard one, so I'm going to ask you to answer it.
Okay.
Says job roles change during CRM implementation. Without having real incentives, how do you manage this change? And I have some thoughts, but I'm very curious about yours.
So much of that is going to be specific to the organization. I don't know the organization but I would say that there are some key pieces within a change management plan that are going to be the same across any organization, and one is communicating that there is buy-in from the top level down. I can't emphasize that enough. I think the second piece is that adequate training and a feedback loop on that training is in place. I think third, having a stated vision that from the top down everyone can relate back to in terms of understanding where you're going will make almost all, I think, reasonable and folks who are in the nonprofit industry who really are mission based, it'll give them a kind of a stake in the ground if that's been communicated well. And then I would say having a sound communication plan that is giving people pretty regular updates about what's going on, and within that I would say, and I don't want to talk politics, but I do think that one of the things that we saw in our presidential election, that not being forthcoming up front about information is really damaging to a project. So talk about the email server, talk about issues as they come up. You don't have to dwell on them, but I would say be as transparent as you can. If there's a delay, almost everyone understands a delay or a change in course if it's communicated continuously and it fits with the vision that you've already put in place. And be transparent about this. This is not always IT's best quality. But force them to be transparent, and I think those things will really make transition simpler.
I really appreciate all that, Frank, and I would add a bit when you're dealing with people on an individual level, which is where their anxiety is located. That CRM vision and trying to paint the picture that this is about the organization as a whole and expanding the impact of the mission, depersonalizes that. Hopefully that's helpful, right? Because if all of us who are in a nonprofit are oriented by and inspired by the mission, then we recognize we have to make some personal sacrifice sometimes for the greater good. Secondarily, if you can show a person how their role will be better with the CRM, almost everybody is going to have a better situation in the future if they're willing to come along for the ride, endure some difficulty, take advantage of the support and training that's offered. They'll end up hopefully spending less time wrestling with their technologies and more time engaged in whatever their role is, contributing to the organization. And finally, at a certain point, we all have to recognize some people sometimes aren't going to make that transition. And that's the way it is. You provide as much support as you can, you provide as much encouragement, as much vision, but you can't, these initiatives are too important to the organization to wrap themselves, contort themselves around one or two individuals who simply can't get on board with it all. So sometimes there's hard decisions that have to be made around that. So we have just another minute here, and I want to, Frank, not leave out your last slide here. Expect the unexpected. So.
Yeah, this is just a little bit. I spoke to this a little bit earlier, but I would emphasize that you are going to have the need to be flexible and resilient through this process. You will start to bump into things you didn't think about. Folks will leave the organization because that's the way work works. There will be all kinds of things that come up in this process that you didn't think were going to happen. We had it on ours. We had a couple of key people just move on to different opportunities in their life, and we had to kind of reshape the way we were doing things around that. So understand that people will be uncomfortable. I would say understand that you are going to have unexpected events occur through the process, and building in the capability to be resilient. And I think that's different from organization to organization. But keeping that in mind as you go through your planning process is really key. And then just lastly, one of the things that we spoke about in the last slide, and I think is really helpful, is creating success criteria for your organization and having that posted in a place where people can refer to it. A lot of times, especially in this area of expecting the unexpected, people aren't satisfied or aren't happy or are begrudging of the project the way it happened. And having success metrics that you can measure, I think, alleviates a lot of that as well.
Craig, I don't know if you just gave me great advice on the CRM project or on my life in general. I think I'm going to take it as both. So, folks, we're at the end of our hour. As you can see, we're very enthusiastic about this. We really believe in it. This is an opportunity not just to change technology, but really to transform your organization to have a greater impact, and that's why we're all doing this. So really appreciate your attendance today, your participation. Please share this information. Please avail yourselves of more that we offer through our resources. And let's all go ahead today and keep making the good change that we are in the world. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, and thank you guys for the opportunity. This I'm glad I could be helpful where it was needed.
Excellent. All right, everybody, go have a great day. Thank you.